The weight of silence. Lennox Greer had learned the geography of invisibility within her first week at Roosevelt High School. The sprawling brick building sat on the eastern edge of town, 3 stories of institutional beige hallways and fluorescent lighting that hummed constantly like anxious insects. She'd memorized the quiet routes, the back stairwell near the art wing, the side entrance by the auditorium, the library's fiction section where no one ever went. These were her corridors of safety, her paths of least resistance through the daily gauntlet of adolescent cruelty. She was small, barely 5'3" in her worn sneakers, with a frame that suggested fragility even though she knew better. Her dark hair hung straight to her shoulders, usually tucked behind her ears, and she had a habit of making herself smaller, shoulders hunched, eyes down, occupying as little space as possible. The other students flowed around her like water around a stone, mostly unaware of her existence. That was how she preferred it. That was the promise she'd made. The first Tuesday morning of September arrived with the kind of oppressive heat that made the asphalt shimmer and the air taste like copper. Lennox navigated through the main entrance, her backpack heavy with textbooks she'd already read twice over. She had her father's mind for retention, could absorb information like paper towels soaking up spills. It was one of the few things she'd kept from him, besides the other skills she never spoke about. The main hallway stretched before her, lockers lining both walls in endless rows of dented blue metal, students clustered in their predetermined groups, athletes near the gymnasium doors, popular girls by the water fountains, band kids outside the music room. The social hierarchy was visible, tangible, enforced by invisible but unbreakable rules. Lennox kept her head down and moved through it all like smoke. Her locker was number 247, tucked in a corner near the janitor's closet, where the overhead light flickered sporadically. She worked her combination lock with practiced efficiency, 32-14-7. The door swung open, and she began the morning ritual of exchanging books. "Watch it." The voice came from her right, sharp and dismissive. Lennox had already begun turning away before she'd even registered the words. A shoulder connected hard with hers, deliberate, and her English textbook tumbled from her hands. It hit the floor with a flat slap that seemed to echo. "Oh, sorry." The apology was wrapped in mockery, dripping with false sweetness. "Didn't see you there." Lennox didn't respond. She crouched to retrieve her book, fingers closing around the worn cover. 3 pairs of expensive sneakers remained in her peripheral vision, white leather Nikes that probably cost more than everything in her locker combined. "She deaf or something?" Another voice, male, amused. "Nah, just rude." The first voice belonged to a girl named Brittany Kerrigan, though Lennox had never spoken to her directly. She knew who Brittany was, the way everyone knew, through reputation, through the gravitational pull she exerted on the school's social orbit. Tall, blonde, athletic, in the way that came from personal trainers and year-round sports camps. Her father was something important downtown, lawyer or banker or politician. The details didn't matter. What mattered was the power she wielded. Lennox stood slowly, book clutched to her chest, and resumed loading her backpack. The 3 students hadn't moved. She could feel their eyes on her back like pressure points, waiting for something, a reaction, a confrontation, anything they could use. She gave them nothing. "Whatever," Brittany said finally, disappointment evident in her tone. "Come on." The footsteps retreated, expensive sneakers squeaking against linoleum. Lennox's hands had remained steady throughout the entire exchange, years of training keeping her breathing even, her pulse controlled. Most people couldn't maintain that kind of composure. Most people didn't have her father's voice in their heads, calm and instructive. Breathe through it. Never let them see what you're feeling. Control your reactions, and you control the situation. She closed her locker and made her way to first period American history, taking her usual seat in the back corner by the windows, The room filled gradually with other students, their conversations overlapping into white noise. Mrs. Patterson began her lecture on Reconstruction, and Lennox took notes in her precise handwriting, filling page after page with information she'd already learned from the textbook chapters she'd read ahead. The incident at her locker should have been nothing, a momentary blip. But Lennox had been through enough schools to recognize the pattern, the testing phase, the probe for weakness. Predators in any ecosystem needed to establish dominance, needed to know who would fight back and who wouldn't. She wouldn't, couldn't, not without breaking the promise. The rest of that first week followed a similar rhythm, small provocations, books knocked from desks, her spot at lunch tables suddenly saved for someone else. Whispered comments just loud enough for her to hear. Nothing overtly aggressive enough to report, nothing that couldn't be explained away as accidents or misunderstandings. Just enough to establish the new social order, to place Lennox firmly at the bottom of the hierarchy. She endured it the way she'd endured everything else since her father's death, with silence and endurance. Every afternoon she walked the 1.5 miles home to the small apartment she shared with her aunt, heated up whatever leftovers existed in the refrigerator, and completed her homework with mechanical precision. Her bedroom was sparse. A bed, a desk, a dresser with a mirror that reflected her serious face back at her. In the closet, hidden behind winter coats she rarely needed, was the gym bag. She hadn't opened it in 4 months. The second week brought an escalation. Monday morning, Lennox arrived to find her locker had been defaced with permanent marker, crude drawings and the word "nobody" scrawled across the blue metal. She spent 15 minutes in the bathroom before first period, scrubbing at the marks with wet paper towels and hand soap. They faded but didn't disappear entirely, leaving ghost images that only she could see. Tuesday, someone dumped their cafeteria tray next to her table during lunch, splattering her jeans with chocolate milk and ketchup. The laughter was immediate and surrounding, dozens of students turning to watch. Lennox stood carefully, gathered her things, and walked to the bathroom to clean up. She missed the rest of lunch period and all of 5th period English, hiding in a stall until her hands stopped shaking. Wednesday afternoon, she walked out to the parking lot to find the tires on her aunt's bicycle flat. Both of them. The bike was chained to the rack near the athletic fields, and when she crouched to examine them, she found the valve stems had been removed entirely. Someone had taken their time, made it deliberate. She walked home that day, 45 minutes in the September heat, and called her aunt from the landline to explain. Her aunt worked double shifts at the hospital and couldn't come get her until after 11. Lennox told her not to worry about it, that she'd already gotten home fine, that everything was okay. She was getting very good at lying. By the end of the second week, Brittany Kerrigan had assembled a full crew. There was Chad Drummond, a linebacker on the football team, with the kind of swagger that came from being told he was exceptional since elementary school. His father ran the largest car dealership in 3 counties, and Chad wore that privilege like armor. He had brown hair perpetually styled with too much gel, and the kind of smile that looked friendly until you noticed it never reached his eyes. Then there was Madison Reeves, Brittany's best friend since childhood, perpetually in her shadow but seemingly content there. She had red hair and a face full of freckles that might have been cute if not for the calculating coldness in her expression. She was the one who filmed things on her phone, who documented the hierarchy's enforcement for later entertainment. The final member of the inner circle was Derek Chen, athletic, handsome, and completely devoted to Brittany in that desperate way that suggested unrequited feelings masked as loyalty. He played basketball and tennis, was taking 5 AP classes, and had the kind of pedigree that promised Ivy League acceptances. He was also the cruelest when he wanted to be, using his intelligence like a scalpel for psychological warfare. Together, they formed Roosevelt High School's apex predators, and they'd decided Lennox Greer was the prey of the season. The third week began with what they probably thought was clever. Monday morning, Lennox found every textbook from her locker scattered across the hallway floor, not just dropped, but arranged in a deliberate pattern that formed an arrow pointing toward the girls' bathroom. Inside the bathroom, someone had taped printed screenshots from social media, except they'd been doctored. Images that looked like Lennox's face, photoshopped onto embarrassing bodies. Fake posts attributed to her saying things she'd never said. Whole conversations manufactured from nothing. She tore them all down methodically, one after another, crumpling them into the trash. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing remained even. But something inside her chest had begun to crack, a hairline fracture spreading across whatever armor she'd built around herself. In the hallway outside, she could hear laughter, multiple voices entertained by whatever reaction they imagined she was having. Lennox gathered her books in silence and went to first period. Mrs. Patterson looked at her with something that might have been concern when she walked in 10 minutes late, but said nothing. The other teachers were the same. They saw everything and nothing, acknowledged reality while simultaneously pretending it didn't exist. Later, Lennox would understand this was its own form of cowardice, but in the moment she only felt the weight of her isolation intensifying. Wednesday brought another cafeteria incident. Lennox had been sitting alone at her usual corner table, working through calculus problems while she ate the sandwich she'd packed that morning. The cafeteria was its typical chaos. Hundreds of students talking over each other, trays clattering, the smell of industrial pizza and overcooked vegetables mixing into something vaguely nauseating. She didn't see them coming. One moment she was focused on her notebook, and the next her entire lunch tray was flipped upward, contents exploding across the front of her shirt. Soda soaked through immediately, cold and sticky. The sandwich disintegrated on impact. An apple rolled across the floor. The cafeteria didn't go silent. That only happened in movies. But there was a noticeable dip in the ambient noise, a collective turning of attention toward the spectacle. Lennox looked down at herself, at the ruin of her clothes, and then up at the faces surrounding her. Brittany stood closest, her expression a masterpiece of false concern. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Your tray was right on the edge. I barely touched it." Madison had her phone out, filming. Of course she did. Chad and Derek flanked Brittany like sentries, their faces showing various degrees of amusement. Around them, other students watched with the kind of hungry fascination people reserve for car accidents and fights. No one moved to help. No one said anything. Lennox stood slowly. Soda dripped from her shirt onto the floor. She could feel it in her hair, on her face, everywhere. The humiliation was physical, a heat that started in her chest and spread outward until her whole body felt like it was burning. "You should really be more careful," Brittany continued, her voice saccharine. "Someone could get hurt." The threat wasn't subtle. Lennox met her eyes for a fraction of a second, long enough to see the calculation there, the testing, and then looked away. She gathered her soggy notebooks and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she heard the laughter resume, sharp and cutting. She spent the rest of lunch period and all of sixth period in the locker room shower, washing away the soda and the shame. She'd brought gym clothes in her locker that she changed into, stuffing her ruined outfit into her backpack. When she finally emerged, seventh period had already begun. That night, alone in her bedroom, Lennox sat on the floor with her back against the door and let herself cry for the first time since her father's funeral. It was quiet crying, practiced and controlled, even in private. She'd learned early that loud emotions drew attention, and attention was dangerous. But the tears came anyway, hot and insistent, tracking down her face until her eyes burned and her throat ached. The gym bag sat in her closet, still unopened. She could see it when she closed her eyes, the black canvas, her father's name stenciled on the side in white letters, the weight of it in her hands. Inside were the gloves, the hand wraps, the memories of a different life, of early mornings in the garage turned gym, her father calling out combinations while she worked the heavy bag, of him teaching her how to move, how to breathe, how to turn her small size into an advantage. "It's not about being the strongest," he'd told her once, his hands adjusting her stance. "It's about being the smartest, about knowing when to engage and when to evade, about control." She'd been 12 then, angry at the world and everyone in it after her mother had left. He'd channeled that anger into training, teaching her Krav Maga fundamentals mixed with boxing technique. By the time she was 15, she could handle herself better than most adults. By 16, she'd won 3 regional competitions in her weight class. And then he'd died. Car accident on the interstate, another driver running a red light at 70 miles an hour. Instantaneous, the doctor said. He didn't suffer. She'd suffered enough for both of them. In the hospital room, holding his hand while machines beeped their futile rhythms, he'd made her promise. "Don't let this define you," he'd whispered, his voice weak but urgent. "Don't let the anger win. The training was meant to protect you, not turn you into someone who hurts people. Promise me, Len. Promise me you'll only use it if you absolutely have to." She'd promised. Of course she'd promised. And she'd kept that promise through 2 different schools, through variations of the same cruelty she was experiencing now. She'd kept it when her aunt had enrolled her at Roosevelt, when they'd moved to this new town for her aunt's job, when she'd hoped maybe this time would be different. It was never different. The 4th week saw the introduction of social media warfare. Fake accounts appeared on Instagram and Snapchat using Lennox's name and photos pulled from who knows where. They posted things designed to humiliate, crude jokes, altered images, manufactured drama. Other students tagged her in comments, mocking and relentless. Lennox didn't have social media herself, but enough people showed her the posts, usually with barely concealed glee at being the messenger. She reported what she could, but new accounts appeared as fast as the old ones were taken down. It was Hydra-headed, regenerating faster than she could fight it. In class, she felt eyes on her constantly. Whispers followed her through hallways. Someone had started a rumor that she'd been expelled from her last school for fighting, which was ironic in its inaccuracy. She'd left her last school specifically because she'd refused to fight back, because the promise to her father had meant more than her own dignity. Friday afternoon of that 4th week, Lennox stayed late in the library, working on a research paper for English. The building was mostly empty by 4:30, just her and a handful of other students scattered among the stacks. She'd found a table in the back corner near the biography section, surrounded by the musty smell of old books and the particular silence libraries cultivated. She was so focused on her work that she didn't hear them approach. "Look who's still here." Lennox's stomach dropped before her brain even processed the voice. She looked up to find Brittany, Madison, and Derek standing around her table in a rough semicircle. No teachers in sight, no witnesses except 2 sophomore girls at a computer station on the far side of the library, too distant to help even if they'd been inclined to. "Working hard?" Brittany asked, her tone conversational. She picked up one of Lennox's textbooks, examining it with exaggerated interest. "That's good. Smart to focus on academics when you've got literally nothing else going for you." Madison giggled, the sound high and artificial. Derek just watched, his arms crossed over his chest. Lennox closed her laptop carefully. "I'm just trying to study." "Oh, she speaks." Brittany's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "I was starting to think you were actually mute, or maybe just stupid." "Please leave me alone." The words came out quieter than Lennox intended, and she hated herself for the weakness in her voice. "Please leave me alone," Madison mimicked in a whiny tone, more giggling. Derek leaned forward, placing both hands flat on the table. "You know what your problem is? You think if you just ignore us, we'll get bored and move on. But that's not how this works." Brittany circled around the table, her movements slow and predatory. "See? You've got this whole tragic loner thing going on, and it's honestly kind of pathetic. But the thing is, pathetic can be entertaining if you know how to work with it. She was directly behind Lennox now. Lennox could feel her presence like heat against her back, every muscle in her body tensing involuntarily. Her training kicked in automatically, threat assessment, exit routes, vulnerable points. She forced it all down, drowning the instincts under the weight of her promise. "We're not asking for much," Brittany continued, her voice almost gentle. "Just a little acknowledgement, maybe some gratitude for us even noticing you exist." "I don't want any trouble," Lennox said, and meant it. She genuinely didn't. She just wanted to be left alone, to finish school, to keep the promise she'd made to her father. Too late for that. Derek's smile was sharp. "You're already in trouble. You just don't know it yet." They left after that, their laughter echoing through the empty library. Lennox sat frozen at her table for a long time afterward, staring at her laptop screen without seeing it. The sophomore girls at the computer station had watched the whole thing and done nothing. Of course they hadn't. Why would they risk becoming targets themselves? That weekend, Lennox barely left her room. Her aunt worked both Saturday and Sunday, pulling doubles to cover the bills. The apartment felt cavernous in its emptiness, every sound amplified. Lennox tried to lose herself in homework, in books, in anything that could distract her from the growing dread in her chest. Sunday evening, she finally opened the gym bag. The gloves were exactly where she'd left them, the leather worn soft from years of use. She held them in her hands, feeling their familiar weight, remembering the countless hours she'd spent wearing them. The hand wraps were rolled neatly beside them, along with her mouthguard and the journal where her father had written training notes. She flipped through the journal slowly, reading his handwriting, hearing his voice in every instruction. "Footwork is foundation. Protect your core. Never telegraph your intentions. Speed beats power. Control beats aggression." And at the very end, dated 2 days before the accident, "Remember, you don't train to hurt people. You train so you never have to be hurt. There's a difference." Lennox closed the journal and put everything back in the bag. She wasn't ready. Maybe she'd never be ready. The promise was all she had left of him. The 5th week began with someone slashing 3 of her notebooks with what looked like a box cutter, destroying months of notes and coursework. Lennox found them in her locker Monday morning, pages shredded beyond repair. She spent her free period in the guidance counselor's office, trying to explain what had happened without sounding like she was asking for help. The counselor, Mrs. Morrison, was in her 50s with kind eyes and the sort of practiced sympathy that suggested she'd heard everything before. "Have you tried talking to these students?" she asked. "Sometimes conflicts arise from simple misunderstandings." Lennox almost laughed. "It's not a misunderstanding." "Well, without specific names or concrete evidence, there's not much I can do. But I can arrange a meeting with all parties involved if you'd like to identify who you think might be responsible." "I don't think that would help." Mrs. Morrison sighed. "Lennox, you need to understand that high school is full of social dynamics. Sometimes the best approach is to focus on yourself and not let others' actions affect you so deeply." Translation: deal with it yourself. Don't make waves. Don't create problems the administration would have to actually address. Lennox thanked her for her time and left. Wednesday brought the attention of the teachers, though not in any useful way. Mr. Harrison, her calculus instructor, pulled her aside after class. "Is everything all right? Your work has been slipping lately." It hadn't been. Lennox knew her grades remained perfect, every assignment completed with precision, but apparently her visible distress was becoming noticeable enough to warrant concern, the wrong kind of concern. "I'm fine," she said, "because if there's anything going on..." "There's nothing going on, I'm fine." He let her go, but his expression said he didn't believe her. Lennox understood the calculation happening behind his eyes. Getting involved meant paperwork, meetings, potential conflict with parents who donated to the school. Easier to ask the question, accept the answer, and move on. That afternoon in the cafeteria, things escalated in a new direction. Lennox had just sat down at her usual isolated table when she noticed the change in energy around her. Students were looking at their phones and then at her, expressions ranging from shocked to entertained to disgusted. Madison appeared beside her table, phone extended. "You've gone viral," she said cheerfully. On the screen was a video. The cafeteria incident from the previous week, Lennox's tray being flipped, soda exploding across her clothes. Except it had been edited, slowed down, zoomed in on her face at the moment of impact, with humiliating captions added. And it had been posted to multiple platforms with Roosevelt High School tagged in the location. The views were already in the thousands. "Thought you'd want to know," Madison said. "You're kind of famous now." She walked away before Lennox could respond. Not that there was anything to say. The damage was done, broadcast to an audience of hundreds of students and countless strangers. Lennox felt something inside her finally break, a dam giving way after too much pressure. She left school early that day, signing herself out with a forged note claiming a doctor's appointment. The secretary barely glanced at it. Lennox walked home through neighborhood streets she was beginning to memorize, past houses with perfectly maintained lawns and cars in driveways, and all the markers of normal lives being lived. Her aunt was home when she arrived, rare for a Wednesday afternoon. She took one look at Lennox's face and pulled her into a hug without asking questions. Lennox let herself be held, breathing in the familiar smell of her aunt's perfume and the antiseptic scent that clung to her hospital scrubs. "You want to talk about it?" her aunt asked eventually. "Not really." "You want me to go down to that school and raise hell?" Lennox smiled despite everything. "No. The offer stands." Her aunt pulled back, studying her face. "You're stronger than whatever they're throwing at you. You know that, right?" "I don't feel strong." "Strength isn't about feeling, honey. It's about what you do even when you feel weak." That night, Lennox lay awake staring at her ceiling and thinking about different kinds of strength. Her father's kind, disciplined, controlled, channeled into purpose. Her aunt's kind, resilient, enduring, continuing despite exhaustion. And what kind was hers? The kind that took punishment without response? The kind that broke silently so no one else had to deal with the mess? She didn't have answers, only questions that multiplied in the darkness. The 6th week brought a shift, though Lennox didn't recognize it immediately. Thursday afternoon, she was sitting in the library during her free period, same table, same corner, same isolation, when someone approached carrying their own stack of books. "Is this seat taken?" Lennox looked up to find a girl she vaguely recognized from her English class. Tall, with dark skin and hair pulled back in neat braids, wearing a vintage band t-shirt and jeans. Her name was Soleil Morrison, no relation to the guidance counselor, and she had a reputation for being quiet but confident in a way that suggested she didn't care what others thought. "It's open," Lennox said cautiously. Soleil sat down across from her and began unpacking her materials. For several minutes, they worked in parallel silence. Then Soleil spoke, without looking up from her book. "That video they posted was bullshit, by the way." Lennox's hands stilled over her keyboard. "You saw it. Everyone saw it. Madison made sure of that." Soleil flipped a page. "For what it's worth, most people thought it was cruel. But you know how it is. No one wants to say anything." "Why are you saying something?" "Because someone should." She looked up finally, meeting Lennox's eyes. "And because I've been where you are. Different school, different bullies, same story. "It sucks." It was the first genuine acknowledgement Lennox had received from anyone at Roosevelt. Something in her chest loosened slightly, the pressure reducing just enough to breathe. "How'd you get them to stop?" she asked. Soleil's smile was humorless. "I didn't. I transferred. They won eventually." She paused. "But you're still here. That counts for something." They didn't exchange numbers or make plans to hang out, but over the next few days, they fell into an easy pattern of sitting together in the library, occasionally sharing observations about homework or teachers. It wasn't quite friendship. Lennox had forgotten how to do friendship, but it was something adjacent, something that made the isolation feel slightly less absolute. The following Monday, Soleil wasn't in the library. Lennox waited 20 minutes before texting her. They'd finally exchanged numbers over the weekend and got back a response that she was home sick. The next day, Soleil appeared in English class but avoided eye contact. When Lennox tried to approach her after the bell, she was already gone. By Wednesday, Lennox understood what had happened. Soleil walked past her in the hallway without acknowledgement, and when their eyes met accidentally, there was apology written across her face before she looked away. The message was clear. Association with Lennox had become too costly. Someone, probably Brittany or one of her circle, had made it known that befriending the target meant becoming a target yourself, and Soleil, having already survived one round of bullying at a previous school, had made the rational choice to protect herself. Lennox didn't blame her. She understood survival calculus, but the loss still hurt in ways she hadn't expected. For a brief moment, she'd remembered what it felt like to not be completely alone. Now that feeling was gone, and its absence created a void that seemed to echo. Thursday afternoon, Lennox's locker was broken into again. This time they'd taken things: a calculator she needed for the physics exam, her favorite pen that had been her father's, a jacket she'd saved for months to buy. Small things, but meaningful. Personalized cruelty designed to demonstrate that nothing she owned was safe, that privacy and security were illusions. She reported it to the front office. The secretary took notes with visible disinterest and said they'd look into it. Nothing would come of it. They both knew it. That weekend, Lennox went running. 5 miles through neighborhood streets, pushing herself until her lungs burned and her legs trembled. She hadn't run like this in months, hadn't done any real physical training since her father's death. But something in her body demanded movement, needed to burn off the accumulated tension before it consumed her entirely. She thought about Soleil while she ran, about how easy it would be to blame her for backing away, but how pointless blame was when faced with the reality of self-preservation. She thought about her father's promise and whether he'd really understood what he was asking of her. She thought about Brittany and her crew, about the entertainment they derived from others' suffering. Mostly, she thought about how much longer she could sustain this. The 7th week began with a new escalation. Monday morning, Lennox arrived to find her locker completely empty, not broken into but cleared out. Every textbook, every notebook, every personal item gone. The locker door stood open like a mouth, exposing the bare metal interior. A crowd had gathered to watch her discover it, their phones already out. The documentation of her humiliation had become ritualistic, expected. Lennox stood very still, staring into the empty space, feeling the eyes on her back like brands. Looking for something. Brittany's voice came from behind her, sweet as poison. Lennox turned slowly. Brittany stood surrounded by her usual entourage, plus a dozen other students drawn by the spectacle. She was smiling, holding nothing, giving away nothing concrete. But the implication was clear. "Where are my things?" Lennox asked, her voice surprisingly steady. "How would I know?" "Maybe you forgot to lock it properly. Theft is a real problem in schools these days." Brittany's eyes glittered with malicious pleasure. "You should really be more careful." The bell for first period rang. The crowd began to disperse, some students casting backward glances, others already moving on to the next bit of entertainment. Lennox was left standing in front of her violated locker with nothing. She spent first period in the bathroom, fighting down the panic attack that threatened to overwhelm her. Her textbooks were expensive. Her aunt couldn't afford to replace them. The notebooks contained months of work. Everything was just gone, vanished into the ether of malicious intent. By lunch, she'd filed another report with the front office. By the end of the day, her things had mysteriously reappeared in the lost and found. Textbooks intact, but notebooks missing pages. Everything subtly damaged in ways that couldn't be proven as vandalism. Tuesday brought a new development. Lennox discovered Soleil sitting alone at lunch, no longer at any of the social tables she'd previously occupied. When their eyes met across the cafeteria, something passed between them. Understanding, regret, shared experience. Soleil gave a small nod that might have been apology or acknowledgement or both. After lunch, Lennox found a note in her locker. "I'm sorry. I tried." She understood. Trying to help had resulted in Soleil becoming a secondary target. Now they were both isolated, both marked. The bullies had effectively neutralized the one potential ally Lennox had found. That afternoon, Derek Chen cornered her after physics class. The hallway was relatively empty, most students already headed to their next period. He stood between Lennox and the exit, his posture casual, but his positioning deliberate. "You're kind of fascinating," he said conversationally. "Most people would have broken by now, or transferred, or at least started crying where everyone could see, but you just keep taking it." Lennox tried to move past him. He sidestepped, blocking her path without actually touching her. Plausible deniability. "What do you want?" she asked. "I'm curious about what your breaking point is." "Everyone has one." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Brittany thinks you'll crack by Halloween. I'm betting you'll last until Thanksgiving at least. You seem tough." "I just want to be left alone." "Sure you do. But where's the fun in that?" He leaned against the wall, examining his nails with affected boredom. "You know what the really sad thing is? If you just played along from the beginning, been grateful for any attention, this could have all been avoided. But you had to be difficult." "Played along how?" "Oh, you know. Laughed at the jokes, accepted your place, didn't make things weird with your whole tragic orphan routine." He said it so casually, like her father's death was a performance she'd chosen. "But instead, you've got this whole silent suffering thing going on, and honestly, it's kind of annoying." Something hot and sharp moved through Lennox's chest. "My father died." "Yeah, I know, everyone knows." "Brittany looked you up." Derek pushed off the wall, finally moving aside. "That's the thing about information. It's all out there if you know where to look." He walked away before Lennox could respond. She stood in the empty hallway, hands shaking for the first time in weeks, that hot, sharp thing in her chest expanding. They'd researched her, dug into her background, turned her grief into ammunition. The gym bag was still in her closet. The promise was still the only thing keeping it closed. Wednesday afternoon, Lennox received her first B in years, on an English essay she'd spent 2 weeks perfecting. Mrs. Patterson handed it back with a note. "Please see me after class." After the bell, Lennox approached the teacher's desk with dread. "I wanted to talk to you about this essay," Mrs. Patterson began, and Lennox braced for criticism. But the teacher's expression was troubled, not disappointed. "Lennox, this is excellent work. I should have given it an A double quote. Confusion. Then why?" "Because..." Mrs. Patterson glanced toward the classroom door, lowering her voice. "I was told there were concerns about plagiarism, that someone had reported suspicious similarity to online sources." Ice settled in Lennox's stomach. "I wrote every word myself." "I know, I checked thoroughly. There's no plagiarism." The teacher's face was pained. But I was encouraged to be extra critical of your work going forward, to make sure everything was above reproach. Who encouraged you? Mrs. Patterson couldn't meet her eyes. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry, Lennox. I know you're going through something, but my hands are somewhat tied. Translation: someone with influence, someone's parent, someone with money or power had pressured her to punish Lennox's grades. Another avenue of attack, more sophisticated than the others. Lennox took her B paper and left without another word. Thursday, she discovered more fake social media accounts. These were more elaborate, containing detailed posts about her supposed mental health issues, fabricated stories about her behaving inappropriately toward other students, claims that she'd made threats, all carefully worded to be just ambiguous enough to avoid legal consequences while still spreading maximum damage. Friday afternoon, the school held a pep rally for the football team's upcoming game. Attendance was mandatory. Lennox sat in the bleachers as high and as far from everyone else as possible, trying to be invisible among hundreds of students. She almost succeeded. Halfway through the rally, during a particularly loud moment when the marching band was playing and everyone was on their feet, someone shoved her from behind. Hard. Lennox pitched forward, barely catching herself on the bleacher in front of her. Her phone slipped from her pocket and fell through the gap between the seats, tumbling down through the bleacher structure. By the time she'd climbed down to retrieve it, the screen was shattered. Lennox stood under the bleachers, holding her broken phone, surrounded by discarded food wrappers and dried gum, and all the detritus of thousands of students who'd sat in these same seats. Through the gaps in the metal, she could see legs and feet, hear the roar of the crowd. Everyone participating in the communal ritual of school spirit while she stood literally underneath them, isolated and forgotten. The metaphor wasn't lost on her. That weekend, she tried to get the phone repaired. The screen replacement would cost more than her aunt made in a week. They couldn't afford it. So Lennox wrapped it in packing tape to keep the shattered glass from cutting her fingers and accepted that she'd be using a broken phone for the foreseeable future. Monday morning of the 8th week, she arrived at school to find a group of students clustered around her locker, laughing at something. As she approached, they scattered like roaches exposed to light. On her locker door, someone had taped a printout. A doctored image of Lennox's face on someone else's body in a compromising position. It was obviously fake, the editing crude, but that didn't matter. The humiliation was the point. She tore it down and shoved it in the nearest trash can. 3 more appeared by the end of the day. Tuesday brought a guidance counselor meeting, not Mrs. Morrison this time, but Mr. Phillips, the vice principal. He sat behind his desk with Lennox across from him, his expression suggesting this meeting was an obligation rather than genuine concern. "We've had reports that you've been involved in some conflicts with other students," he began. "I haven't been involved in anything." "I'm being bullied." Bullying is a strong word, Lennox. Sometimes what students perceive as bullying is actually just normal social friction. She stared at him. "They've vandalized my locker multiple times, stolen my possessions, posted humiliating videos of me online, and created fake social media accounts spreading lies about me. What would you call that? Without concrete evidence linking specific students to specific actions, my hands are tied. High school can be challenging socially, but learning to navigate difficult interpersonal dynamics is part of growing up. So you're not going to do anything. I'm encouraging you to focus on your own behavior and responses. Sometimes the best way to handle difficult situations is to not engage, to rise above it." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm also recommending you speak with the school psychologist. These kinds of social challenges can sometimes stem from underlying issues with social skills or presentation." Lennox understood what he was really saying. This is your fault. You brought this on yourself. Fix yourself and the problem will go away. She left his office knowing nothing would change. The administration had made their position clear. Maintaining order meant not rocking the boat, and victims who complained were the real problem because they created work. Wednesday afternoon, Lennox was walking to the library when Chad Drummond accidentally ran into her, sending her books flying. It was the same tired trick they'd been using for weeks, but this time he didn't bother with the pretense of apology. "Watch where you're going, orphan," he said, loud enough for the dozen students nearby to hear. The word hung in the air like something toxic. Orphan, using her father's death as an insult, reducing her grief to ammunition for their entertainment. Lennox felt something shift inside her chest, that hairline fracture widening into a fissure. "Pick them up," she said, her voice low. Chad laughed. "Excuse me? My books. Pick them up. Or what?" He stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. He was easily 6 inches taller and 60 pounds heavier. "You gonna make me?" Every student in the hallway had stopped to watch. Phones were already out. Lennox could feel the moment crystallizing, becoming the entertainment they all craved. She looked at Chad's face, smug, confident, completely assured of his dominance, and felt the fissure in her chest split wider. Her father's voice was there, quiet but insistent. Control. Always control. She took a breath and crouched to gather her books herself. The laughter that followed was expected, familiar. Chad walked away victorious, surrounded by his friends, already retelling the story. But something had changed. Lennox could feel it in the way her hands remained steady despite the humiliation, in the way her breathing stayed, even while her heart hammered, in the certainty settling into her bones that this couldn't continue forever. That night, she opened the gym bag again, took out the gloves and put them on, feeling the leather conform to her hands like memory. She threw a few punches at empty air, jab, cross, hook, and felt her body remember the patterns her mind had tried to forget. Her father's journal sat open on her bed. She read his words again. "You don't train to hurt people. You train so you never have to be hurt." But she was being hurt every single day, in ways that left no visible marks, but accumulated like poison. And the promise she'd made was protecting everyone except herself. Thursday morning brought another cafeteria incident. Lennox was carrying her tray to her usual table when someone stuck their foot out. She saw it at the last second, pure instinct and training letting her spot the threat. But she was already committed to the step. She could have adjusted, could have pivoted and avoided it entirely. Instead, she let herself trip, let the tray go flying, let herself sprawl across the floor in front of hundreds of students, let them have their show. The laughter was immediate and overwhelming. Madison was there with her phone, capturing everything. Brittany's voice rose above the chaos. "God, how clumsy can one person be?" Lennox picked herself up slowly. Food stained her clothes again. Different food, same humiliation, endless repetition. She looked around at all the faces watching her, some amused, some guilty, most indifferent. And she smiled. It wasn't a real smile, not even close. But it was enough to confuse them, to disrupt the expected script. Lennox smiled and walked out of the cafeteria with her head up, leaving the mess behind her. In the bathroom, she washed her face and stared at herself in the mirror. Her reflection looked back, small, dark-haired, ordinary except for her eyes. There was something different in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. Friday afternoon, Soleil finally approached her again. They were both in the library, maintaining their careful distance, when Soleil slid a note across the table. "I'm sorry I couldn't help." "Are you okay?" Lennox wrote back, "I don't know." It was the most honest thing she'd said in weeks. That weekend passed in a haze. Lennox went running again, longer distances this time, pushing until her body couldn't think anymore. She did push-ups and sit-ups in her room. She unwrapped the hand wraps from the gym bag and wrapped them around her hands with practiced movements, muscle memory guiding her fingers. She didn't hit anything. just wrapped and unwrapped her hands over and over, thinking about control and promises and how much a person could endure before something fundamental broke. The 9th week arrived with autumn settling in properly. October transformed the trees along Roosevelt's campus into a riot of reds and oranges and yellows. The air turned crisp. Students started wearing jackets and complaining about cold classrooms. Lennox noticed none of it. She moved through her days like a ghost, present but not participating. In class, she took her notes with mechanical precision. In the hallways, she navigated the shortest routes. At lunch, she sat alone and ate quickly, always aware of her surroundings, always ready for the next incident. It came Tuesday afternoon. Lennox was at her locker between classes when she heard Brittany's voice nearby, not directed at her, just close enough to hear. Talking to Madison about something, laughing about someone. Then Soleil's name floated through the conversation, followed by more laughter. Lennox's hands paused on her combination lock. She looked over to see Brittany and Madison standing near Soleil's locker, effectively blocking her from accessing it. Soleil stood nearby, her expression carefully neutral, waiting for them to move. "It's so sad," Brittany was saying, her voice pitched to Carrie, "when someone has to try so hard to be different. Like, we get it, you're quirky and unique, but it just comes across as desperate." Soleil didn't respond. She'd learned the same lesson Lennox had. Engagement only made it worse. "And the worst part is she actually thinks she's better than everyone," Madison added. "Just because she reads books and pretends to be deep." Lennox watched Soleil's face, saw the micro-expressions she was trying to suppress, saw herself reflected in that struggle. Something in her chest pulled tight. She closed her locker and walked over. Every step felt measured, deliberate. Students sensed something happening and began to pay attention, that familiar current of anticipation running through the hallway. "Excuse me," Lennox said, her voice quiet but clear. "You're blocking her locker." Brittany turned slowly, eyebrows raised in exaggerated surprise. "Oh look, the mouse speaks. And she's defending someone. How cute. Just move. Make us," Madison suggested, smile sharp. It would have been easy, so incredibly easy. Lennox knew exactly where to strike, how to use leverage and momentum to move them without causing real harm. Her training had prepared her for scenarios exactly like this. 3 seconds, maybe 4, and they'd be out of the way. But that wasn't who she was supposed to be. "Please," she said instead, hating the word even as she spoke it. Brittany laughed, genuinely laughed, delighted by Lennox's compliance with the script. "That's better. Since you asked nicely." She and Madison moved aside, making elaborate gestures of accommodation. Soleil got her books and disappeared quickly, not making eye contact. Lennox understood. Getting helped made you complicit, made you owe something. Better to handle it yourself. The rest of the week followed similar patterns. Small cruelties, constant undermining, the death by 1,000 cuts that was more effective than any single dramatic act. Lennox endured it all with that same mechanical determination, counting down hours until she could escape to her room. Thursday night, her aunt came home from the hospital looking more exhausted than usual. She found Lennox in the kitchen making dinner, pasta with sauce from a jar, garlic bread from the freezer. "You're a lifesaver," her aunt said, sinking into a chair. Then she really looked at Lennox and something in her expression shifted. "Baby, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Don't lie to me. You've got that same look your father used to get when he was holding something in. What's happening at school?" Lennox stirred the pasta, not turning around. "It's fine." "Len, I don't want to talk about it. Please." Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying her. Her aunt was quiet for a long moment, then, "You know you don't have to keep every promise you make, right? Especially if keeping it is hurting you. I'm not breaking it. Sometimes being strong means knowing when to ask for help, when to fight back. Your father wouldn't have wanted you to suffer to keep some vow he made you give when he was dying. Lennox's hands tightened on the wooden spoon. You don't know what he would have wanted. He was my brother. I knew him better than almost anyone, and he'd hate what's happening to you right now. The pasta was done. Lennox drained it in the sink, steam rising into her face, grateful for the excuse to hide her expression. They ate dinner in uncomfortable silence, the conversation hanging between them unfinished. Friday arrived with rumors of a party that weekend, something at Derek Chen's house, his parents out of town, half the school invited. Lennox heard about it the way she heard about everything, through overheard conversations and fragments of social media posts she saw on other people's screens. She wasn't invited, obviously, but that didn't stop Brittany from making sure she knew about it. It's going to be epic, Brittany said loudly in the cafeteria, positioned so her voice would carry to where Lennox sat alone. Only the important people, you know? Not everyone can make the cut. Madison giggled on cue. God, could you imagine if just anyone showed up? Talk about awkward. They were performing for an audience, and Lennox was the punchline. She kept eating her sandwich, eyes on her food giving them nothing. But that night, alone in her room, she let herself imagine it, showing up at that party uninvited, walking through the door and watching their faces change. Not to fight, not to cause a scene, just to exist in a space they designated as off-limits to her. The fantasy was ridiculous, childish. She'd never do it. But for a few minutes, she let herself live in that alternate reality where she had the kind of courage that didn't require violence. The 10th week began with Monday morning announcements, including a reminder about the homecoming dance in 3 weeks. Lennox had zero interest in attending, but the announcement sparked renewed energy throughout the school. Students discussed dresses and dates and after parties. The social hierarchy became even more visible as couples formed and groups solidified. Lennox existed outside all of it, a satellite orbiting a planet she'd never land on. Tuesday brought a new tactic. Someone had created a fake email account using Lennox's name and sent messages to several teachers claiming she was planning to harm herself. The result was a concerned intervention, being pulled out of third period to meet with the school psychologist, having to explain that no, she wasn't suicidal, yes, she was fine, no, she didn't know who would send those emails. The psychologist, Dr. Brennan, was younger than Lennox expected, with kind eyes but a script she was clearly following. These kinds of situations can sometimes be cries for help, she said gently. Even if you didn't send the emails, the fact that someone thought you might be struggling could indicate— I'm not struggling, Lennox interrupted. Someone is harassing me. That's different. Can you tell me who? Would it matter if I could? Dr. Brennan's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy. I can only help if you're willing to identify specific concerns and work with me on solutions. Translation: name names with proof or deal with it yourself. The same answer from every adult in this building. Lennox left the office with a referral for weekly counseling sessions she had no intention of attending. Wednesday afternoon, she discovered her gym locker had been broken into. Her PE clothes were missing, replaced with a note. Did you really think we forgot about you? She borrowed clothes from the lost and found bin, refusing to let them see her affected. But the message was clear: nowhere was safe. They could reach her anywhere at any time, through any means. That night, Lennox sat on her bedroom floor with the gym bag open in front of her. She took out each item methodically: the gloves, the hand wraps, the journal, the old mouthguard. At the very bottom was a photo she'd forgotten was there. Her and her father at one of her competitions, both of them smiling, her arm raised in victory. She'd been so different then, confident, capable, unafraid. The girl in that photo wouldn't have tolerated this treatment for 10 minutes, let alone 10 weeks. But the girl in that photo hadn't made a promise to her dying father. Thursday morning began with another cafeteria incident, but this time it was different. Lennox was walking to her usual table when Derek stepped directly into her path, close enough that she had to stop or collide with him. "I've been thinking about you," he said, his voice conversational. "About what makes you so stubborn. Most people would have cracked or run by now." Lennox tried to move around him. He mirrored her movement, maintaining the block. "It's like you think if you just endure long enough, we'll get bored and stop. But that's not how this works." He tilted his head, studying her face. "We stop when you break. When you cry in front of everyone, or lash out and get yourself expelled, or just give up and leave. Those are your only options. Let me pass." "Or what?" He smiled. "You'll ask nicely again? Maybe say please." Students were watching, always watching, phones probably recording already. Lennox felt the familiar weight of their attention, the hunger for drama. She looked at Derek, really looked at him, saw past the expensive clothes and practiced confidence to the insecurity underneath, the need to prove himself, to maintain his position in the hierarchy through cruelty because he had nothing else to offer. "You're pathetic," she said quietly, meaning it. His smile vanished. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "What did you say?" "You heard me." Lennox felt something shifting inside her, that fissure widening into something that might have been liberation or destruction, or both. "You spend all this time and energy tormenting someone half your size because it's the only way you feel powerful. That's pathetic." Derek's hand shot out, grabbing her arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to restrain. "You need to watch your mouth." "Or what? You'll do what you've already been doing?" Lennox pulled her arm free with a twist that was pure muscle memory, a defensive move from years of training. Derek's eyes widened slightly at the ease of it. "Touch me again, and you'll regret it." She walked past him before he could respond, heart hammering but stride steady. Behind her she heard the murmur of student reactions, the shift in energy. She'd finally done it, broken the script, responded instead of enduring. The rest of the day, students looked at her differently. Some with newfound respect, others with anticipation, waiting to see what would happen next. Brittany's circle was noticeably quiet, conferring in tight groups, planning something. Lennox knew she'd just escalated things, knew she'd painted a target on herself larger than before, but some part of her felt lighter than it had in months. Friday afternoon, she received a text from an unknown number. "Tonight, Derek's party. Be there or we make Monday very interesting for you and your friend, Soleil." They were threatening Soleil now, pulling her back into the crossfire. Lennox stared at her broken phone screen, at the threatening message visible through the cracks, and made a decision. She'd been running for too long, hiding, enduring. Maybe it was time to do something different. Not violence, never that. But maybe standing up didn't have to mean fighting back. Maybe it meant showing up, being present, refusing to be erased. She texted back, "What time?" The response came immediately. 8. Bring your friend. This should be fun. That night, Lennox stood in front of her mirror and tried to decide who she was. The girl who kept promises. The girl in the photo, confident and unafraid. Something in between, something entirely new. She put on her best jeans and a simple black shirt, braided her hair back from her face, looked at herself and saw someone she barely recognized. Not a victim, not a fighter, but something else she didn't have a name for yet. Her phone buzzed. "Soleil, did you get a message about tonight?" Lennox, "Yes, we're going." Soleil, "Are you sure?" "This feels like a trap." Lennox, "Definitely a trap. We're going anyway." There was a long pause before Soleil responded, "Okay, I'll meet you there." Lennox told her aunt she was going to a study group, which was technically true if you defined studying broadly enough. Her aunt looked skeptical, but didn't push it. Be safe. Text me if you need anything. I will. All right. The walk to Derek's house took 25 minutes through darkening streets. Lennox could hear the party before she saw it. Music throbbing, voices raised, the particular chaos of dozens of unsupervised teenagers. The house was large, expensive, set back from the street with a circular driveway already crowded with cars. Soleil was waiting at the end of the driveway, arms crossed over her chest. This is a terrible idea. Probably, Lennox agreed. We could still leave. We could. Neither of them moved. What's the plan? Soleil asked. Show up. Exist. Refuse to run. That's not much of a plan. It's what I've got. They walked up the driveway together, two girls who barely knew each other, united by shared victimization and the kind of desperate courage that came from having nothing left to lose. The front door was open, students flowing in and out. Music poured from every window. Someone had strung lights through the trees. Lennox and Soleil stepped inside. The reaction wasn't immediate, but it was noticeable. Conversations stuttered. People turned to look. Word spread through the party in visible ripples. The targets had crashed. The entertainment had arrived uninvited. Within 30 seconds, Brittany materialized from the crowd like a shark drawn to blood in the water. Well, well, she said, her smile sharp. Look who decided to show up where she wasn't invited. You told me to come, Lennox said calmly. Did I? Brittany's eyes glittered. I don't recall extending an invitation. The crowd was gathering now, forming a loose circle around them, phones emerging from pockets, the energy shifting toward anticipation, toward the promise of spectacle. Madison appeared at Brittany's elbow. Should we call the cops? Report trespassers? Don't be dramatic, Derek said, pushing through the crowd. He looked at Lennox with something between amusement and calculation. Let them stay. This could be interesting. Interesting how? Chad asked, appearing beside Derek. I don't know yet. Derek's smile was cold, but I'm sure we'll figure something out. For the next hour, Lennox and Soleil existed in a strange limbo. They weren't actively being harassed, but they weren't being ignored either. Students watched them constantly, waiting for something to happen. Small provocations tested their resolve. Someone spilling a drink near them, loud comments about uninvited guests, pointed exclusion from conversations. They endured it all with the same quiet determination that had sustained them through weeks of bullying, stood together in the corner of Derek's massive living room, refusing to be driven out. Then, around 9:30, things shifted. I'm going to the bathroom, Soleil said. Be right back. Lennox nodded, watching her disappear into the crowd. She stood alone for the first time since arriving, suddenly aware of how exposed she was. That's when she felt it. The wrongness. A prickling at the back of her neck, instinct screaming danger. She turned, scanning the room, looking for the threat she couldn't identify, and realized her phone was gone. She'd left it in her jacket pocket, hanging on a chair near the wall. She rushed over to find the jacket still there, but the pocket empty. Her broken, taped-together phone stolen. Lennox stood very still, processing this new violation. Her phone contained everything: photos of her father, text conversations, access to all her accounts. It was the one possession that mattered, and they'd taken it. She looked up to find Brittany watching her from across the room, that familiar shark smile on her face. Their eyes met, and Brittany raised Lennox's phone in a mocking toast. The crowd noticed. Of course they noticed. Students began gathering, sensing the climax approaching. Looking for this, Brittany called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Lennox walked toward her slowly, fighting to keep her breathing even. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. Give it back. Wait, what's the magic word? Madison giggled. I'm not playing this game. Give me my phone. Or what? Brittany held the phone higher, just out of reach. You'll do what, exactly? Chad appeared beside her, then Derek. The core group, united. Behind Lennox, other students blocked the exit. The trap was sprung and she'd walked right into it. This has been fun, Brittany said, her voice carrying through the suddenly quiet room. Watching you suffer for weeks, but honestly, it's getting boring. You just take it and never give us anything interesting. So, we decided to raise the stakes, Derek added. See what it takes to finally break you. Brittany examined the broken phone, making a show of it. You know what's on here? Pictures of your dead daddy, sad little messages to his number that will never be answered. It's honestly depressing. The words landed like physical blows. Students gasped audibly. Even for them, this was crossing a line. Lennox felt something inside her chest go very still and very cold. Give it back. Now. Why? What are you going to do? Brittany's smile widened. This is the problem with you. You're so passive, so helpless, so... She made a mistake then. In her theatrical mockery, she moved closer, phone still raised, within reach. And Lennox's body remembered. It wasn't a decision. It was reflex, training, muscle memory, deeper than thought. Lennox's hand shot out and captured Brittany's wrist with a grip that made the other girl gasp in surprise. Not painful, but absolutely controlled. The phone dropped from suddenly nerveless fingers. Lennox caught it with her other hand without looking, still maintaining that grip on Brittany's wrist. The room went silent. Let go, Brittany said, trying to pull away. She couldn't. Lennox's hand was iron, each finger precisely placed to control the joint without causing injury. You took something that belongs to me, Lennox said quietly, her voice carrying in the silence. Something that matters. And you did it because you thought I couldn't do anything about it. She released Brittany's wrist and took a deliberate step back, phone safely in her own hand now. You were wrong. Brittany rubbed her wrist, eyes wide with something that might have been fear. Did you just assault me? I retrieved my property that you stole. Everyone saw you steal my phone. Soleil's voice cut in. She'd returned from the bathroom and fought through the crowd. And everyone saw her take it back without hurting you. Even though she could have, the last three words hung in the air, shifting the dynamic. Lennox hadn't realized how that grab had looked, the speed, the precision, the complete control. But the students around her had noticed, were noticing. Chad stepped forward, physically larger and trying to intimidate through size alone. You need to leave, now. Lennox looked at him, really looked, and saw him with all the clarity her father's training had taught her, saw the tells, weight distribution, tension in his shoulders, the slight forward lean that telegraphed aggression. She saw where he was strong and where he was weak, saw that he'd never been in a real fight in his life, that all his confidence came from size and social status. She could take him apart in 5 seconds without breaking a sweat. But that wasn't who she was. I'm leaving, she said calmly, but I want you all to understand something first. The crowd was completely focused on her now. Dozens of students, dozens of phones recording. Perfect. For weeks, you've made my life hell. Vandalized my property, spread lies about me, humiliated me publicly, turned one of the hardest things I've ever experienced into entertainment. And I let you. I took it. I stayed quiet because I promised someone I loved that I would never use violence unless I absolutely had to. She looked at each of them, Brittany, Derek, Chad, Madison. But what you don't understand is that I was protecting you, not myself. You. Derek laughed nervously. Protecting us? From what? Lennox didn't answer directly. Instead, she moved, one step, fluid and controlled, and she was beside Derek. Her hand flashed out, not to hit, but to tap. 3 points on his torso in rapid succession, light as feathers but precise as surgery, floating ribs, solar plexus, throat. "There," she said quietly. "If I'd wanted to hurt you, you'd be on the ground right now." She turned to Chad. "And you. You're what, 220? 230? You think size matters? It doesn't. Not against someone who knows where and how to strike." One quick movement. She stepped inside his reach, her hand stopping a millimeter from his exposed throat. He flinched backward involuntarily. "I could have broken Brittany's wrist when she had my phone," Lennox continued, addressing the whole room now. "It would have taken almost no pressure. Same with every time any of you touched me, shoved me, got in my face. I had the advantage every single time, you just didn't know it." "Bullshit," Chad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "My father was Special Forces. He started training me when I was 8 years old. Krav Maga, boxing, self-defense. By the time I was 14, I'd won multiple competitions in my weight class. By 16, I could hold my own against adults twice my size." She let that sink in. "And when he died, he made me promise I wouldn't use that training, that I wouldn't become someone who hurt people just because I could." The silence in the room was absolute. Every face showed varying degrees of shock. "So I didn't," Lennox said. "I let you steal from me, humiliate me, threaten me, because keeping that promise mattered more than my pride, more than fighting back, more than proving I could." She held up her broken phone. "But this was too far. This contained the last things I have of my father, and you took it to hurt me, to break me, to get some kind of reaction." Brittany had recovered slightly, trying to regain control. "So what? You're threatening us now?" "No." Lennox's voice was firm. "I'm explaining why you should be grateful I kept my promise. Because if I hadn't, if I'd decided to fight back even once, someone would have ended up in the hospital, and it wouldn't have been me." She looked at each of them again, meeting their eyes. "I'm not a victim because I'm weak. I'm a victim because I chose not to fight. Because I'm stronger than all of you, and I proved it by walking away every single time." Derek's face had gone pale. "If this is true, it's true," Soleil said from behind Lennox. "I've seen her reflexes. The way she moves. I didn't understand it before, but I do now." Madison's phone was still recording. "Good. Let them have this documented. Let everyone see." "So here's what's going to happen," Lennox said, her voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "This stops. All of it. The harassment, the vandalism, the lies. It ends tonight. Or what?" Brittany tried to sound defiant, but the fear in her eyes was visible. "Or nothing. Because I'm still not going to fight you. That's the point you're missing." Lennox's smile was sad. "I could destroy all of you without breaking a sweat, but I won't. Because that's not who I am. I made a promise, and I'm keeping it." She took a step back, Soleil moving beside her. "But now you know what I could have done. What I chose not to do every time you hurt me. You didn't win because you were stronger or smarter or better. You won because I let you. Remember that." They walked toward the door. The crowd parted without being asked, students stepping aside quickly. Lennox could feel their eyes on her back, hear the whispered conversations starting. At the door, she paused and turned back. "One more thing. My father taught me that true strength isn't about dominating others. It's about protecting yourself and people you care about without becoming a bully yourself. You all failed that test. I didn't." Then she and Soleil walked out into the night, leaving chaos behind them. They made it 2 blocks before Soleil started laughing, high and slightly hysterical. Oh my God, that was terrifying," Lennox suggested. "Amazing. Did you see their faces? They genuinely thought you might—" Soleil broke off, studying Lennox's profile. "Wait, is it all true? The training, the competitions?" "Every word. And you really could have. Yes. Lennox's voice was quiet. I really could have. That's why I didn't. They walked in silence for a while, processing everything that had happened. Finally, Soleil spoke again. What happens Monday? I don't know, but at least now it's on my terms. Do you think they'll actually stop? Lennox considered that. I think they're scared now. They know they were targeting someone who could have hurt them badly but chose not to. That changes things. And if it doesn't, then I keep the promise. Because it's not about them. It never was. Soleil nodded slowly. You're kind of incredible, you know that. I'm exhausted and I just want to go home. That too. They parted ways at the corner near Lennox's apartment. Soleil pulled her into a quick hug. Thank you for standing up for both of us. Thank you for being there. Inside the apartment, her aunt was still awake, watching TV. She took one look at Lennox's face and muted the television. What happened? I kept my promise, Lennox said, but I also stood up for myself. Are you okay? I think so. Maybe. I don't know yet. Her aunt studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Your father would be proud of you. How do you know? Because I'm proud of you, and he loved you even more than I do. That night, Lennox lay in bed staring at her ceiling and thinking about strength, about her father's promise and what it had cost her, about the look on Brittany's face when she'd realized Lennox could have hurt her but chose not to. Her phone, broken, taped, recovered, sat on her nightstand. She'd checked it obsessively since getting home, making sure all the photos were still there. They were. Her father's face looked back at her from the screen, frozen in that moment of victory and joy. I kept it, Dad, she whispered to the empty room. I kept the promise. I hope that matters. The phone offered no response. It never did. But somehow, she felt lighter than she had in months. Monday morning arrived with the kind of anticipation that made Lennox's stomach clench. She dressed carefully, ate breakfast she didn't taste, and walked to school with her shoulders back and her head up. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Students stared at her openly as she walked through the main entrance, some with respect, others with curiosity, a few with residual hostility. But no one looked through her anymore. She was visible now, unavoidably present. At her locker, she found a crowd waiting, not threatening, just watching. Lennox worked her combination and opened the door, half expecting vandalism. But her locker was untouched. Is it true? Someone asked. A girl from her history class whose name Lennox didn't know. Is what true? That you could have kicked Brittany's ass this whole time but didn't? I didn't want to fight anyone, Lennox said carefully. I still don't. But you could. That's not the point. But it was the point, at least for them. By lunchtime, the story had evolved and mutated through its journey across social media and whispered hallways. Lennox was alternately described as a trained assassin, an underground fighter, and a martial arts champion. The truth was less dramatic, but somehow more impressive. She'd had the power to retaliate all along and had chosen restraint. Brittany and her crew were notably absent from their usual territories. When Lennox finally saw them in the cafeteria, they were sitting at a corner table instead of their usual center stage position. Brittany wouldn't meet her eyes. Derek approached her after fifth period. Lennox tensed instinctively, but his body language wasn't aggressive. I wanted to... He started, then stopped. Tried again. What happened Friday night? That was... We didn't know. Would it have mattered if you did? I don't know, maybe not. But it should have. He looked genuinely uncomfortable, an expression Lennox had never seen on his face before. I'm not saying we're suddenly cool or anything, but maybe we can just leave each other alone from now on. It wasn't an apology, barely even an acknowledgement. But it was something. That works for me, Lennox said. He nodded and walked away. By the end of the week, a new equilibrium had established itself. Lennox was no longer invisible, but she wasn't actively targeted either. Students greeted her in hallways, some with genuine friendliness. Teachers seemed to notice her existence for the first time. The fake social media accounts had been deleted. The stolen property mysteriously returned to her locker. Soleil became a real friend rather than a circumstantial ally. They sat together at lunch, worked on homework in the library, texted about homework and teachers and normal things that normal students discussed. It was strange and wonderful to have someone who understood what she'd been through. 2 weeks after the party, Chad approached her before PE class. "My dad wants to know if you'd be interested in doing some self-defense classes at his dealership's community center. He's willing to pay you." Lennox stared at him. "Why?" "Because word got around about your training and people are interested." And because he shifted uncomfortably. "I told him what we did to you, and he said I needed to make it right somehow. This was his idea." "Your father knows you bullied me?" "Everyone's parents know by now. The videos from the party got shared everywhere." Chad's face was red. "My dad's pissed. I'm grounded until Christmas and doing community service." This was one of his conditions, that I had to ask you personally if you teach self-defense. It was such a bizarre turn of events that Lennox almost laughed. "I'll think about it." "Cool. Yeah, thanks." He practically fled. That night, Lennox sat with her aunt and explained the offer. Her aunt listened carefully, asked good questions, and finally said, "What do you want to do?" "I think." Lennox considered it. "I think my dad would have liked the idea. Teaching people to protect themselves without teaching them to be violent. Then you have your answer." A month after the confrontation at Derek's party, Lennox stood in front of a class of 15 students, ranging from middle school age to adults. The community center's gymnasium smelled like floor polish and old basketballs. Mats covered the floor. Her father's gloves sat in the gym bag at her feet. "Self-defense isn't about winning fights," she told her class. "It's about not having to fight at all. It's about awareness, de-escalation, and knowing when you absolutely have to act. Most conflicts can be resolved or avoided without violence, but when they can't, you need to know what to do." She demonstrated basic strikes, defensive positions, how to break grips and create distance. The students were attentive, asking questions, practicing with focus. Among them was one of the sophomore girls who'd witnessed her being harassed in the library and had done nothing. Now she was learning how to stand up for herself, and maybe, eventually, for others. After class, the girl approached hesitantly. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for not helping you when you needed it." "I understand why you didn't," Lennox said honestly. "It's hard to risk making yourself a target. But you did it anyway. You stood up even when no one helped you." "I had advantages you didn't. Training, experience. That made it easier." "Still brave," the girl insisted. Maybe it was. Lennox was still figuring that out. At school, life continued its forward momentum. Homecoming came and went without incident. Lennox didn't attend the dance, but she heard it was drama-free. Brittany had transferred to a private school after Thanksgiving, her father's choice supposedly, after the videos from the party had gone viral enough to embarrass his legal practice. Derek had genuinely apologized 2 weeks after their last interaction, a real apology with eye contact and acknowledgement of harm. They weren't friends, wouldn't ever be, but they could exist in the same space without hostility. That was something. Chad had become almost painfully polite, going out of his way to hold doors and apologize if they accidentally made eye contact. Lennox found it more uncomfortable than the bullying in some ways. She didn't want constant deference. She just wanted to exist in peace. Madison had deleted all her social media accounts and seemed to be working through some combination of guilt and therapy. She'd written Lennox a letter of apology that was probably assigned by a counselor but seemed sincere enough. The best development was that other students had started speaking up about their own experiences. The viral videos had opened a conversation about bullying at Roosevelt that the administration could no longer ignore. Actual policies were being implemented. Teachers were being trained. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One December afternoon, Lennox found herself back at her father's grave for the first time since the funeral. She sat in the cold grass, her breath visible in the winter air, and told him everything. "I kept the promise," she said to the headstone, "even when it hurt. Even when I wanted to break it. Because you asked me to, and because you were right. Violence should always be a last resort." The cemetery was quiet except for wind rustling through bare tree branches. But I also learned something else. Keeping the promise wasn't about being passive. It was about being strong enough to choose restraint, strong enough to protect myself without becoming the thing I hated. She traced the letters of his name carved in stone. "You knew that. That's why you asked me to promise. Not to make me weak, but to make me stronger." A crow called from somewhere nearby, harsh and clear. "I'm teaching now. Self-defense classes, the way you taught me, not just the physical techniques, but the philosophy behind them. When to engage, when to evade, when to stand your ground." She smiled through tears she didn't try to stop. "I think you'd like that." She sat there until the cold became uncomfortable, then stood and brushed grass from her jeans. "I love you, Dad. Thank you for the promise. Even though it was hard, it was worth it." Walking back to the car, she felt lighter. The gym bag was in the trunk. She'd been using it regularly now for her classes. The gloves had become tools again, instead of reminders of loss. At school the next day, Soleil met her at her locker with news. "Remember that party where everything went down? Someone made it into a case study." "What?" "Yeah, some college professor saw the videos and wrote about it for a psychology journal. About conflict resolution and de-escalation. You're literally in an academic paper about choosing non-violence effectively." Lennox laughed, surprising herself. "That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard." "Right? But also kind of cool. Like your dad's promise didn't just protect you. It became this example of a different way to handle things." Later that week, Mrs. Morrison, the guidance counselor, asked Lennox to speak at a school assembly about bullying. Lennox almost refused. She didn't want to be defined by what had happened, didn't want to become the poster child for victimization. But then she thought about the sophomore girl in her self-defense class, about Soleil finally having a friend group that accepted her, about the students who'd messaged her privately to share their own stories. She agreed. The assembly was scheduled for the first Monday after winter break. Lennox stood backstage in the auditorium, heart pounding, while the principal gave an introduction about addressing school climate. Then she walked out to face 800 students. "I'm not here to tell you a story about overcoming bullying," she began, her voice carrying through the microphone. "Because that makes it sound like there's a simple solution, and there isn't. Bullying is complicated. It involves perpetrators and victims and bystanders and systems that fail to protect vulnerable people." The auditorium was quiet, hundreds of faces watching. "What I want to talk about is choices. The choices I made when I was being harassed and the choices everyone else made around me." She took a breath. "I chose not to fight back, even though I could have. That was my choice, based on a promise I made to someone I loved. It wasn't weakness. It was the hardest thing I've ever done." She looked out at the crowd and saw Soleil in the third row giving her a subtle nod of encouragement. "But here's what I learned. My choice only worked because eventually I stood up for myself in other ways. I stopped running. I stopped hiding. I made myself visible and demanded to be treated with basic human dignity." She paused. And you know what? That was when things started to change. Not because I threatened anyone or used violence, but because I stopped accepting that treatment was inevitable. Movement in the back. Derek Chen was there, listening. Chad Drummond too. Madison Reeves. All the people who'd made her life hell, all of them hearing this. The students who targeted me made choices too. They chose cruelty when they could have chosen indifference or kindness. They chose entertainment over empathy. And yeah, they faced consequences for those choices. But more importantly, some of them chose to change afterward, to acknowledge what they'd done and try to be better. She saw Derek nod slightly. And then there are the bystanders. The people who watched and did nothing. That was a choice too. Maybe the most common one. And I understand it. I really do. It's scary to speak up. It's risky to intervene. But silence enables bullies. Every time someone watches and says nothing, they're choosing the bully's side. Uncomfortable shifting in seats throughout the auditorium. So, here's what I want you to take from this. You have choices, always. You can choose to hurt people or help them, to speak up or stay silent, to change or stay the same. Those choices define who you are more than anything else. She looked directly at the camera recording this. And if you're currently being bullied, know that you have choices too. You can ask for help. You can stand up for yourself in whatever way feels safe. You can survive until circumstances change. But you don't have to accept being treated badly as inevitable. She stepped back from the microphone. The applause started slowly, then built. Not universal. Some students looked uncomfortable or defensive. But enough. It was enough. Afterward, students approached her in the hallway, some to thank her, others to apologize for their inaction, a few to share their own stories, to ask for advice, to say they were glad someone finally spoke up. The vice principal, Mr. Phillips, pulled her aside. That was powerful, Lennox. I want you to know that we're taking concrete steps to address these issues. With respect, sir, students have been raising these issues for years. What's different now? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Nothing should have had to happen for us to take this seriously. You're right, but we're committed to doing better moving forward. I hope so. Because I was just one person. There are dozens more like me who suffered in silence because the system failed them. I know. We're working on that. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Spring semester brought new rhythms. Lennox's self-defense classes had expanded to 2 sections, plus a women-only class on Saturdays. She was saving money for college, building a resume of community service and leadership. Her grades remained perfect despite everything. She'd also started training again herself, not because she needed to, but because it connected her to her father. She found a local boxing gym run by a former Marine who'd known her dad. They worked together twice a week, and he told her stories about her father she'd never heard before. He was proud of you, the coach said one evening while she worked the heavy bag. Talked about you constantly, how smart you were, how disciplined, how you'd understood the lessons he was teaching better than most adults. Then why did he make me promise not to fight? The question had been haunting her for months. Because he knew you'd be good at it. Really good, and he didn't want that to become your identity. The coach held the bag steady while she threw combinations. He didn't want you to be defined by your ability to hurt people. He wanted you to be defined by your choices. Lennox's punches slowed, then stopped. He got his wish. He did. And if he could see you now teaching others, helping people feel safe, using your skills to protect rather than attack, he'd be so damn proud. The semester continued. Soleil got cast in the spring musical, Derek Chen got accepted to Stanford early decision and seemed genuinely happy, less concerned with social hierarchy. Chad Drummond started volunteering at the community center, helping set up for classes. Madison Reeves had transferred to a different school, apparently working through things with intensive therapy. And Lennox was just existing, going to classes, teaching her courses, hanging out with friends, planning for college. She'd applied to several schools for programs in psychology and conflict resolution. Wanted to study why people hurt each other and how to interrupt cycles of violence. One March afternoon, she was leaving the gym after her training session when she saw a familiar figure getting out of a car in the parking lot. Brittany Kerrigan, though she looked different, hair shorter, less makeup, clothes more casual. They froze, seeing each other. Then Brittany walked over slowly, hands visible, posture non-threatening. "I'm not here to cause problems," she said quickly. I heard you train here now. I wanted to talk if you'd let me." Lennox waited. "I've been in therapy. A lot of therapy. Working through a lot of things. About why I acted the way I did, where that came from, how fucked up it was." Brittany's voice was different too, less performative, more genuine. "And my therapist said I should try to make amends with people I hurt. But only if they're willing to hear it." "I'm listening," Lennox said carefully. "I'm sorry. Really, genuinely sorry. What I did to you was cruel and inexcusable. I targeted you because you seemed vulnerable, and hurting you made me feel powerful. That's disgusting. I was disgusting." Brittany's eyes were wet. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did was wrong, and I'm trying to be better." Lennox studied her face, looking for manipulation or performance. She saw only shame and sadness. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Really?" "Because I hated myself. My dad was always pushing me to be perfect. Perfect grades, perfect body, perfect social standing. Nothing I did was ever enough. And making other people feel small made me feel big." Brittany wiped her eyes. "That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. Your dad made you transfer schools?" "Yeah, and started family therapy, and made me volunteer at a crisis center for teens, which has actually been educational, hearing stories from people about being bullied, understanding the real impact. It's..." She trailed off. "I'm rambling. I'm sorry, I'll leave you alone now." She started to turn away. Lennox surprised herself by speaking. "I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did caused real harm that I'm still processing." Brittany nodded, face crumpling. But Lennox continued, "I appreciate you acknowledging it. And I hope you really do become better. The world has enough cruelty in it already. Thank you for even hearing me out." Brittany took a shaky breath. "For what it's worth, the way you handled everything, the restraint, the control, the choice not to fight even when you could have, that's what made me finally see how wrong I was. You could have destroyed me, but you didn't. That was powerful." After she left, Lennox sat in her car for a long time thinking about forgiveness and redemption and whether people could truly change. She didn't have answers, but maybe the point was trying, even when outcomes weren't guaranteed. Prom season arrived with its usual fanfare. Soleil asked if Lennox wanted to go, and after some consideration, she agreed. They'd go as friends, part of a group, taking back the social spaces that had once felt hostile. The night of prom, Lennox stood in front of her mirror, wearing a simple blue dress her aunt had helped her find. Her hair was down for once, curled slightly. She looked at her reflection and barely recognized herself. Not because she'd changed dramatically, but because she finally looked comfortable in her own skin. Her phone buzzed. "Soleil. Ready for this?" Lennox. "As ready as I'll ever be." The prom was held in the school gymnasium, transformed with decorations and lighting that made it almost unrecognizable. Music pounded from speakers, Students danced and laughed and took photos. It was surreal being there among people who'd either tormented her or ignored her suffering, now all pretending to be friends and celebrating together. But it was also freeing. She wasn't hiding anymore, wasn't afraid, just existing in the same space as everyone else, claiming her right to be there. Derek approached her near the refreshment table. "Can I talk to you for a second?" They stepped outside into the cool night air. Stars were visible above the parking lot lights. "I've been wanting to say this properly," Derek began. "What I did to you was wrong. Not just the bullying itself, but the way I justified it. Told myself you deserved it, or were asking for it, or that it wasn't that serious. All of that was bullshit. I hurt you deliberately, repeatedly, because it made me feel powerful. And I'm sorry." It was the second real apology she'd received, and it landed differently than Brittany's. Maybe because Derek had been there for all of it, had witnessed and participated in every escalation. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. "Because I'm going to college in the fall. Starting over somewhere no one knows me, and I don't want to be that person anymore, the one who needs to hurt others to feel important. But I can't change without acknowledging what I did first." He met her eyes. "You deserved better, from all of us. I'm sorry we failed you." Lennox took a breath, feeling something loosen in her chest. "Thank you for saying that. It matters. Can I ask you something?" Derek's voice was tentative. "How did you do it? How did you keep from breaking or fighting back? Or just giving up?" "I made a promise to someone I loved, and I had to decide every day whether keeping that promise was worth the cost." She looked up at the stars. "Some days I wasn't sure it was, but I kept it anyway. That's incredible strength, or stubbornness. Sometimes I can't tell the difference." They went back inside separately. The prom continued around them, students dancing, teachers chaperoning, the normal rituals of adolescent celebration. Lennox danced with Soleil and their friend group, laughed at bad DJ choices, ate mediocre catered food, participated in the communal experience instead of being excluded from it. And it felt like victory. Not the kind that came from defeating enemies, but the quieter kind that came from surviving long enough to see things change. Graduation arrived in May with its traditions and ceremonies. Lennox sat among her classmates in the alphabetical seating arrangement, wearing the required cap and gown, waiting for her name to be called. When it came, she walked across the stage to polite applause. Nothing special, nothing dramatic, just another graduate receiving a diploma. But as she shook the principal's hand and accepted the rolled paper, she thought about how far she'd come. How she'd entered Roosevelt as a ghost, trying to disappear, and was leaving as someone who'd found her voice, her way, her strength. In the audience, her aunt was crying proud tears. The coach from the boxing gym had come too, keeping his promise to attend. Soleil was 5 names after her, and when her friend crossed the stage, Lennox cheered louder than anyone. The reception afterward was held on the football field. Families mingled, took photos, celebrated their students' achievements. Lennox's aunt pulled her into a crushing hug. "Your father would be so proud," she said for what felt like the 100th time, and Lennox believed it. Several classmates approached throughout the afternoon to say goodbye, to exchange information, to promise to stay in touch. Some of them she'd barely spoken to during her time at Roosevelt. Others had been part of the problem, witnesses to her suffering. Now they all wanted to pretend they'd been supportive friends. Lennox was gracious but honest. She accepted the well-wishes without pretending the past hadn't happened. Chad Drummond found her near the parking lot as things were winding down. "I wanted to give you this before we left." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check, a substantial one, made out to her self-defense program. "My dad's dealership wants to sponsor your classes," Chad explained. "He was really impressed by what you've built. And I He paused. I wanted to contribute something meaningful, as another way of making amends. Lennox looked at the check, then at Chad. This is too much. It's not enough. It'll never be enough to make up for what we did. But maybe it can help you help others. He shoved his hands in his pockets. You turned something awful into something positive. I don't know how you did that, but I'm glad you did. After he left, Lennox stood holding the check and thinking about cycles of violence, of healing, of harm and redemption. How sometimes breaking those cycles required people to make different choices than the ones that came naturally. That night, at home in her bedroom, Lennox packed her things for college. She'd been accepted to 3 schools and had chosen one with a strong psychology program and an emphasis on conflict resolution. She'd be leaving in August, starting over in a new place with new people who didn't know her story. The gym bag sat in the corner. She was taking it with her. Inside were the gloves, the hand wraps, the journal with her father's notes, tools and memories both. She opened the journal to the last page, where her father's final entry still waited. Under his words, she picked up a pen and added her own. I kept the promise, Dad. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I kept it. And you were right. True strength isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting yourself and others without losing who you are. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it. I hope wherever you are, you know that I understood what you were teaching me. I love you. Always. Lennox. She closed the journal and packed it carefully in her bag. The last day before leaving for college, Lennox went back to Roosevelt High School. The building looked different, empty, smaller somehow, less intimidating. She walked through the familiar hallways, past her old locker, through the cafeteria, where she'd been humiliated repeatedly. All the places that had once felt dangerous now just felt like empty rooms. In the library, she found the table where she'd spent so many hours hiding, where Soleil had first approached her, where she'd begun to understand that isolation wasn't sustainable. She sat there for a few minutes, remembering and processing and finally letting go. Her phone buzzed. Soleil. Ready for the new adventure? Lennox. More than ready. Walking out of the school for the last time, Lennox thought about the girl who'd walked in on that first day in September. Terrified, grieving, determined to be invisible, she'd survived through strength and stubbornness and the promise that had nearly broken her. She thought about her father's lessons, about control and restraint, and the choice to protect rather than harm, about how she'd taken those lessons and built something meaningful from them, classes that taught others not just how to fight, but when not to. She thought about Brittany and Derek and Chad, about the complicated reality that people could change if they chose to, about forgiveness being possible without forgetting. Mostly she thought about moving forward, about college and new beginnings and the person she was becoming. Someone defined not by what had been done to her, but by how she'd responded to it. The afternoon sun was warm on her face as she walked to her car. Somewhere she imagined her father was proud. Not because she'd won fights or dominated opponents, but because she'd been strong enough to choose mercy over violence every single time. That was real strength. That was real victory, and it was hers. She got in the car, started the engine, and drove away from Roosevelt High School without looking back. The past would always be there, shaped into lessons and scars, but the future waited, full of possibility and promise. And Lennox Greer drove toward it with her head held high, her father's gloves in the trunk, and the certainty that she'd kept her promise without losing herself. In the end, that was all that mattered. Behind her, the school building grew smaller in the rearview mirror until it disappeared entirely. Ahead, the road stretched open and clear, leading her toward whatever came next. She was ready.